Shalom, this is Mary Omni from the World Government House of King David, Holy Covenant Constitutional Enforcer. This is a Republic Notice. The title of this Republic Notice is called Why Black Women Can Have a Puerto Rican Mate and Maintain Their Holy Covenant Status, but a black man cannot. Why black women can have a Puerto Rican mate and maintain their Holy Covenant status, but a black man cannot. Okay, I'm going to give you just a brief constitutional history background because it leads into what I'm going into. And that is this. In 1865, the constitutional jurisdiction was changed. The constitutional jurisdiction was changed from consent jurisdiction to non-consent jurisdiction. Why? Because involuntary servitude became non-consented in the Constitution in 1865, and that changed the whole Constitution. The whole Constitution had to be changed to abolish slavery, because slavery had been going on since the inception of the Constitution. And in order to change this institution, the whole Constitution had to be changed from consent jurisdiction to non-consent jurisdiction to involuntary servitude. Okay? Now, that's one part of the 13th. The other part of the 13th is voluntary servitude by consent to serve the Most High. So it's a holy part. So it took the unholiness away and opened the room for holiness to come in and for people to meet at the table of brotherhood in a holy reasoning of God's sovereignty, liberty, and serving the holy kingdom. And that's called 13 voluntary servitude by consent to serve the holy kingdom. Now, blacks are the non-consenters, so that doesn't apply to them. They're the holy non-consenters. They was the one that the whole Constitution was changed for, and it became non-consent jurisdiction. They're the non-consenters because 3/5 couldn't consent. And even when they gained constitutional legality, that didn't change that. Once a non-consenter, always a non-consenter. Now, what happened is in 1866, the Civil Rights Act came about, and black holy non-consenters inherited the Bill of Rights, the 1 through 10 amendments, along with the 13th, and then along with the 1866 Civil Rights Act, where now they had the Bill of Rights and they became national citizens and national persons with jurisdiction rights in all states and all territories. Now, since they could not consent, and the Dred Scott decision proved that, because Dred Scott had no legal rights, that meant no legal rights to consent. So blacks are inherited. God's namesake inherit, his direct namesake inherit, they don't consent. Okay, this 1866 Civil Rights Act gave blacks jurisdiction, non-consent jurisdiction in all territories and all states. That meant that they had the contractual supremacy of non-consent on all jurisdictions in all states, so thereby none could infiltrate any jurisdictions or states that they had non-consent contractual supremacy as national and sovereign persons with rights of contractual enforcement automated, called non-consent jurisdiction. Now, somewhere I read that because of this 1866 act, that they tried to say that Puerto Rico or Puerto Ricans who still fighting for statehood as a territory, Puerto Rico had the same 1866, but no one had nothing that blacks had because blacks couldn't consent for it. So when it was legislated, it automatically became non-consented by supreme contract. So no territory or no state had it. Only these non-consenters had it by the supreme contract, because they now became national and state sovereign persons and citizens with non-consent contractual reinforcement. So this 1866 Civil Rights Act, it belongs only to black Americans. No other state or jurisdiction dwellers or bodies have them. Okay, so that takes off the misnomer, because I read someplace that, oh, it was given to Puerto Rico. No. If it was, they still wouldn't be fighting for statehood and this right and that right. No, it was not, because it was automatically non-consented to any foreign or any jurisdiction or any other. It wasn't even considered to white folks within the Constitution, so it wasn't considered to Puerto Rican folks who was in the territory, okay? Now, be that as it may, putting that history aside, as one of the first infringers on black Americans, they brought Puerto Ricans in and allowed them to move on top of black people in neighborhoods. And as a result, Puerto Ricans and blacks kind of like developed a sort of relationship, sort of like, I would say, cousins. Cousins that fight, cousins that, you know, have jealousy, have this kind of issues and that kind of issues, but nevertheless some kind of play cousin, okay, I'll put it that way. Now, the reason that black and Puerto Ricans identify with each other, because they was both oppressed groups, and they was both oppressed in their country, in Puerto Rico, and when they came and they migrated to the United States, they was also was oppressed. Now, getting back to the title of the video about black women staying in covenant status when they take up with a Puerto Rican man, is understanding this: the black woman is the first receiver of the 14th. She's the first non-consented that receives the 14th. So she's the supremacy clause of the Constitution. And that's why the war and the degradation of her is propagandized by the nuclear bomb of media. They done did everything to try to degrade this supremacy clause woman, so you can never identify this black constitutional holy covenant woman who gives birth to the Mashiach is right under your nose in America, okay? And because she has the Christ seed in her, she has certain protections as the woman seed. Now, a lot of black men say, oh, it doesn't mean when you say Genesis 3:15, woman seed, only the man can have the seed. That comes from the man. It doesn't mean that, you know, it means that she gives birth to the Christ. Well, she still gives birth to the Christ. This Judah black woman, non-consent jurisdiction, still give birth to the Christ. That makes her important right there. As Galatians 4:4 state in the Bible, when the time had come and the time of the Gentiles was fulfilled, that the Mashiach was born under the law and came under the law of the woman. That's that woman in the Constitution, the 14th Amendment. That's the Judah black woman. Now, she has found Puerto Rican men easy to deal with, because almost every place I lived, even my next door, not my next door neighbor now, but before I left home, my next door neighbor was, you know, a dark chocolate woman with a Puerto Rican man. And I found this a lot. You know, some Puerto Rican men have the thing for chocolate women. See, they look past that other stuff, and they might be being called and have a natural attraction for them because maybe that's who they are, you know, okay? Now, and so we have had a long time of black women taking up with Puerto Rican men. I think she even got a jump on the black men. There's maybe the one jump she got with another other than the black man. She got a jump, I think, a little bit on him, taking up with Puerto Rican women. Of course, he went to wars, and World War II and World War I, Vietnam, so he has been with all kind of women. And right now in the 21st century, he gets his little fiat money as an NBA or football. He gets fiat money and he gets these contracts, and then he tells the world a black woman is not good enough for him when he has money. She's only good enough to raise him and give him birth. Otherwise, he has nothing else to do with her once he gets money. And he gets this fiat money, but he don't understand that fiat money is only an exchange, honey. Fiat money is only an exchange, honey. I don't care if it come in a billion. Fiat money is only an exchange, honey. Okay? And guess what? If you got a contract, that contract for basketball, whatever, that in corporate doctrine contract, it cannot equal or match the Constitution or the supremacy clause in the Constitution. As a matter of fact, if you're not with a black woman as a basketball, football player, and you're with another foreign woman or any other woman other than a black woman, then you have made children with another woman other than the black woman, then your little corporate doctrine contract don't have no backup, no teeth, because that means you done abridged your 15th Amendment. That means you had to jump out of the Holy Covenant over the New Jerusalem wall, walk through the U.S. corporate mule, who the Constitution owns, but the mule dung is right there because the mule craps out dung of people trying to, acting like they're going to take over the wealth of the Constitution. They become dung contractors. So when you try to transfer the wealth outside the Constitution to all these women you want to take up with, whether white, black, Asian, or whatever, you have to leave out of your 15th wall. You have to abridge your 15th Amendment in order to take up with them. So you lose your covenant status as a black man. A black woman, she doesn't have to abridge the 15th. She doesn't have to bridge your 15th. She is in the Constitution, the Holy Covenant, as the Supremacy Clause, okay? And so, therefore, she doesn't have to go beyond the New Jerusalem Wall. By black men abandoning the New Jerusalem Wall and taking up with all these women, men like Robert De Niro and President Obama is coming in the New Jerusalem Wall. And even though the 15th Amendment is there, and the 15th Amendment is the wall of non-consent jurisdiction, the point is, if it's not enough black men on that wall and other men get in, then that 15th can only stop it until a baby is born. So in other words, if a Puerto Rican man come in that wall, the only thing that the 15th can do is stop it until she has a baby. Okay, once she has a baby, she done had a baby with that Puerto Rican man. His blood is in the Holy Covenant contract now, okay, with her. So any men have to be stopped before a baby is made, okay? You know, any men have to be stopped before a baby is made. And unfortunately, it's not enough black men who want to stay on that wall and protect the black women. So the Most High allowed her to have men who will serve his mother nation, who will serve the nation the Mashiach is born through, who will serve the woman the Mashiach is born through. Now, how do you know that the black woman is not in the wrong? Well, let's look it up. Let's look up the biblical scripture. Matthew 5:32. Matthew chapter 5:32. But I say unto you, that whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, okay, causes her to commit adultery. That means these black men is fornicating with all these foreign women, and the black woman is his wife. But he put her away, and for 40, 50 years he's been running and acting like he had access to all other women, and no black man never stood up and said he didn't. No black man checkmated him. No black man stood up for this black woman. So they all seem like by quiet agreement or, compliance that it's all right for this black man to run around. So let me read it again, 5:32. But I say unto you that whosoever shall put away his wife, meaning his Judah wife, saving for the cause of fornication, you put her away to run with all these women, causes her to commit adultery. And whoever shall marry her that is divorced, commit adultery. So that means if another man come in and marry her, he is committing adultery. And the black man who put her away is committing adultery. In the meanwhile, she's not blamed for anything. The two men are blamed. But behind the fact that the blood of Christ is in the black woman, that Puerto Rican man can then come under the law of the woman and have his blood cleansed through the black woman and become an adopted son like President Obama, who was the 44th president under Galatians 4:4, made room for adoption so they can then call on the Holy Father Abba. Okay? So we see here both men are blamed. The woman, the non-consent jurisdiction black woman is not blamed, okay? The man who comes while she's alone and he takes up with her is blamed. Her Judah husband running around on her is blamed for not giving her enough attention and for telling the world that he want to fornicate with every other woman once he get a little fiat money exchange. And he want to then sign contracts of blood contracts of incorporate doctrine, bondage, and go into bondage and just for a little fiat money in a dung contract, because he done made blood contracts now. Once he make blood contracts outside the Judah woman, all his contracts are dung. He is got nothing but fiat money and contractual destitution. That black woman in that supreme contract holds and owns everything he got for the cause of adultery. And if that Puerto Rican man mess up with her, she owns everything he got for the cause of adultery. So, okay? So now this is biblically written. You look up Galatians 4:4, and you look up Matthew 32. And this is why the black woman taken up with a Puerto Rican man remains in a holy covenant. As long as that Puerto Rican man is committed to that black woman and their children together, he can maintain holy covenant status and have the name of Christ for himself and his children. Meanwhile, those who going outside, meaning the black man, all he gonna have is Satan's name and bondage. As soon as Satan follows, go lip in his mouth, he will see what he has done to abridge and hang himself by breaching his own 15th and breaching his own 14th, and he's still an adulteress. He's still an adulteress. And any woman he takes up with, including Puerto Rican, is considered his adulterous whore that he put his wife aside for the cause of fornication.
This is Mary Omni from the house of King David. Shalom.